Ladies and gentlemen, this is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint's Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. You've heard their point, now listen to the counterpoint.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty. We are coming at you on December 1st, 2021. Somehow managing to make it through most of the year, even though Biden's our president. That's a miracle in itself. But before we get into any of the issues, let me introduce you to our panel. In our upper left-hand corner, we have our invisible hand, James Just, who has become visible in order to help us out here as one of our panelists. And in our upper right-hand corner, we have our screaming eagle of freedom, Tim Everett. He is a pilot in the state of California, and my name is Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host today. So let's get right into it. This episode is kind of a war of words, or a play on words, or whatever you want to call it, but just all the ways we're kind of manipulated lately with words, and the idea that people are trying to win the argument by just sort of manipulating the words. And one of the first topics I wanted to get into on that is the recent attack that occurred in Waukesha, Wisconsin, which was pretty close to where the whole Rittenhouse thing went down in Kenosha. But this happened about a week or so after the verdict in that case. And there was a parade of people, and a guy in an SUV wound up driving through the parade, essentially, and not as part of the parade. He literally just drove through, killing people. He wound up killing 6 now, I believe, in that. And it's funny, too, because, this guy seemed like a real scumbag, a lot of problems with him and everything else. But if you were watching WAPO or listening to WAPO, Washington Post, or CNN, you would have thought it was the SUV that was the culprit in this case, because the way they reported it, they said an SUV, essentially, that this was caused by an SUV was the quote in one of the articles from Washington Post. And CNN said, I believe that the parade was hit by an SUV, but of course nothing about the guy who was actually driving the vehicle. And I'll just scroll down here so that you all can see. This is the person who's being charged with this right now. They haven't done a trial or anything or convicted him, but he's got a rap sheet a mile long, and apparently he had been let out of jail from attacking his girlfriend, I believe, with the same SUV. So I guess that SUV is just out of control. And apparently it's doing, it's not waiting around to get us with climate change in the long term. It's coming for us today. So anyways, you guys have any thoughts on this story and how, these just manipulating us with words?
Never mind the district attorney that let this guy go numerous times, and part of their policy they have to impress their liberal buddies in Wisconsin. So never mind that, and it's just like the left likes to blame the object, like the AR-15 or whatever gun is used. Too many guns, too many SUVs. Too many things just out there tempting these otherwise pillars of society with high levels of morality and restraint, like this guy. And but they just succumb to these temptations to take these instruments and utilize them to the best of the instrument's ability. For example, an SUV can mow over more people than a regular small, like a Prius, right? They would never say that a Prius mowed down these people, because, that's a favored lefty vehicle. But oh my God, the SUV, the gas guzzling SUV, that's all this American muscle and steel. You got to get into that. There you go, James.
Well, there's 2 parts of this. There's one part if the media was simply being careful about how they were covering an issue, to not stoke flames and to be very careful to preserve the rights of the defendant and the rights of the victims. And if that's what they were doing, then I would have no problems with it, really. But we know that's what they're not, because we've just watched other cases where they've deliberately stoked fires. So we know that there's a underlying agenda here at play. So we know that this is not the media being responsible, all of a sudden learning, oh, we're going to be responsible in how we cover these events so we don't stoke unnecessary fears and unnecessary division amongst the populace. No. They're doing this because it doesn't fit their narrative. And so they're going to blame the SUV, or like Tim said, they'll blame the gun, they'll blame the weapon, rather than blame the person or the system that is actually causing this. Like, they won't blame the fact that this guy should never have been about. He was a domestic abuser, a repeat domestic abuser. He should have been in jail, but yet he was out. And was the first story that he was fleeing a domestic incident that may have been involving a knife. Yeah. But no one was chasing him. Why are you fleeing? That didn't even add up to begin with. So the media has been altering this story from the very beginning, and it's kind of disgusting, even though I don't necessarily mind them being careful if that's what they were actually doing, if that makes any sense.
Well, yeah, and this is part of the problem, right? Because like you said, this is on the tail end of a couple of other things. When we just had the Rittenhouse trial where it didn't fit their narrative, the idea that, white kid goes to a, Black Lives Matter protest, he winds up killing 3 people. And the idea that these all could have been white felons who were attacking him, it didn't fit their narrative. And so, they kept the race part, very quiet, other than the fact that he was white going to a Black Lives Matter protest, to the fact where there were some journalistic organizations where they literally were reporting this as he had killed 3 black people, because they just assumed he had killed 3 black people based on, CNN, Washington Post, and some of these other people's reporting, because of the way that they sort of played fast and loose on the race issue here. If it meets their narrative, they're going to highlight race, and if it doesn't, then hey, look, an SUV just mowed down a group of people.
That's the thing, and I don't mind the coverage being kind of careful. I don't actually mind it, except we know that it's BS. We know that they're doing it for a reason other than we're going to be careful, and that's the problem that's the part that really irritates me.
Yeah, well, I tell you, this isn't the only, time that, race pops up on things, and it's just sort of taken out of context or everything else. There was a funny little story, and let's see if I can get the story back up here. There it is. So in this case, the Chicago Tribune, we just came through Black Friday, right? And so Black Friday, most people realize that's just a crazy shopping day. Anybody who is been shopping for over a decade knows that that's the day that essentially people are in the Christmas spirit, fighting over limited supply of low price toys and other electronic goods, all in the Christmas spirit. But that's essentially what most people's experience with Black Friday has been going back decades. It's, when retailers essentially are trying to work their way back into the black, which is, what they call being profitable again. Unfortunately, in our current racially charged society, anything that doesn't fit the narrative, suddenly it's vilified or whatever. And, and so this particular thing was something that the Chicago Tribune had. It was just, I guess, opinion page. But, somebody put in there, Black Friday should be renamed so it is not discriminating and profiling against black people. I just can't imagine, where they get this stuff from. But I mean, that's the world we live in right now. And just to add on to this, before I throw you guys this to you, there was a survey that was done by Campus Reform, I think, on one of the college campuses out there, and they'd gone through and they interviewed kids, and they asked them, well, should we rename Black Friday? And none of them knew where this came from, why the term was Black Friday or anything, but they all assumed it was nefarious reasons for calling it Black Friday. So anyways, do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, let's call it White Friday. I can handle it.
Well, who's the people who keep telling us that black equals bad? It's not. I've never.
It's the left. It's the liberals. That's all they think about.
I'm 50 years old, and the only people who keep telling me that black equates bad is the people who keep telling me black equates bad. So but it doesn't. It's just a color. It's just a color spectrum. I personally like black. It makes me look thin. So,
Are you saying that black people are all thin?
No, I'm not.
They just look thinner than they are. That's what
Remember, I come from I have an interracial family, and so this notion that we're continually dividing people by race, I'm going, what race is my granddaughter? She's black, white, and Asian, Filipino specifically. What race is my other granddaughter? She's black, white, and Hispanic. What race is my grandson who's black, white, and black? At some point, it has to not matter anymore. And the fact is, black does not equate bad. It doesn't. This is an old-time movie thing from black and white movies where it was easy to distinguish characters. That's the whole reason the white was good, the black was bad. It's from a short period of history of movies, of color movies. That's it.
Well,
but it's not. Ironic. Yeah. No, it's just we've taken that little nugget of history and pretended that it means this whole thing, that we all think about it all across culture, and we don't. But they keep telling us we do.
Well, what the irony of this particular case is literally the reason it's called Black Friday is because it means as a business, you're back in the black. And that means it's a good thing. The business understands being in the black means that you're making a profit. That's literally what it meant. That's why they call it being in the red, which is what was happening before Black Friday, essentially meant that you were still paying off all of your bills over the year. And everything you made after that date was supposedly putting you in the black. So but apparently we just can't use colors to represent anything without offending someone nowadays. Yeah. I don't know.
They gotta get rid of that black and red stuff too for profitability.
There you go. Yeah. Well, speaking of another term too, that's or another case where the language is being tried to manipulate it on us to make us feel a different way. So there is a professor, apparently, I can't quite remember where the professor is from, but this is Old Dominion University, and so the idea with this professor is he has I guess he's way into the transgender type issues, and so he's decided that that he is interested in trying to destigmatize pedophilia, I guess, or at least people who are have that affliction, I guess, where they're attracted to minors. And so he wants to rename the term minor attractive people, or MAPS. So, and the idea is he's saying, look, this is something that people don't choose. This is maybe just the way they're born. I'm not agreeing with him one way or another on this, but the point is he wants to take the stigma off of these people being called pedophiles by calling them MAPS. And, it just seems to me like, these people are constantly trying to, I guess, win the argument or get what they want by just playing sleight of hand with the language. I mean, pedophilia literally means, philia means to love, I believe, in Greek, and pedo means, I believe, child or something to that nature. And so it means, loving of children, I guess. Mm-hmm. And so the idea, that's literally what it means. So, but let's not use language that literally means what they're pointing to. Let's recreate it so we have no idea what it means. So it's we're just in chaos. What do you guys think of this? It's just
they want to get rid of that Greek language, and yeah, it's nuts. Go ahead, James.
Well, this whole thing is kind of nuts because what happens historically is they've said, well, this term, regardless of what it is, this term has some negative connotations to it, so we're going to use different terminology. But because it means the exact same thing, the negative connotations just follow the new language. It's not like you're going to fool anybody. What are you actually trying to accomplish? Now, I actually kind of get it. This is I get part of what they're looking at. Academically, I can understand it. You want to understand where this comes from so you can properly deal with it. So I understand why people want to study it academically, and I can understand where, from an academic point of view, it makes it difficult. but life's tough. Life's difficult sometimes. And in an academic world, this goofiness of the language actually cost him his job. If he'd have just continued calling them pedophiles and pedophilia and dealing with that, he could have had the discussion. He could have actually had the discussion. But now we can't even have the discussion he wanted to have because he wanted to play with the language. And people were going, and people said, no, this is too far. And it was. It's too far.
Well, and this is a thing I think that you make a really good point, and that's the idea that it doesn't matter if you change the language. You may fool people in the very short term, as just because they'll be confused about what you're talking about, which in my mind is counterproductive. I mean, if you're having a discussion with somebody and you're only getting your way because the other person is confused, that's not really a good thing. But like you said, I mean, the negative connotations of what is happening there, they carry over. I mean, and eventually it'll be like, well, if you hated the pedophiles, you're going to hate the maps eventually too.
It's the same group. Literally nothing changes. You're just using different letters around. You're just moving letters around. It doesn't change anything. And God, it's like, do these people actually live in the real world? I just wonder sometimes, do these people actually live in the real world?
Well, to add on to this, and just to give you guys a flavor, this isn't the first time this happened. I mean, this is, we're having this show because this is happening constantly, whether it's not a person, but the SUV attacking people, or, the pedophile is now a map. So we're not quite sure who he is yet, whatever. But politically correct language, that's been something that's been being changed on us for a long time. And so I found this one article, and they just have a whole list of changed language, and you can kind of understand, on some of these things, maybe some people think maybe a new way of saying it might be more accurate. One thing I have noticed, though, is generally in a lot of cases, the new term tends to have more syllables, so it's not as efficient a lot of times. But a lot of times they're changing something like chairman to chairperson, right? Or here in this case, a cripple is now a person with a disability. They'll still be just as disabled as they were when they were crippled, but how they're identified will change, I guess. But and we've seen this constantly throughout the. One of my favorites, I guess, is this. When they talk about sex change surgery versus gender reassignment surgery, and they're constantly trying to tell us with this gender and sex that gender is just how you identify, but it doesn't have anything to do with sex. But why do you need a surgery then to change with how you identify? As far as if it's all the social construct or something, I don't know. So anyways, but it's just one thing after another. Plus sized for fat. Even to the point where I remember one of the most ridiculous instances we had was where the Prime Minister of Canada, I can't think of the guy's name off the top of my head, but he
Trudeau.
Trudeau. And so he was at a town hall a few years back, and he was a gal was saying her opinion about something. And she said to bring peace or something to all mankind, I believe she said. And then he stopped her and he corrected her and he said, "We say people kind instead of mankind." So, I mean, this is the kind of silliness that, we have going on here. But you guys have any thoughts on just this constant deluge of politically correct language changes that we have to keep up with?
I'm just glad I was extorted instead of blackmailed. That's all I can say.
That made all the difference.
Yes, it did.
Well, George Carlin made a career out of this, didn't he? Poking holes in this whole political correctness language, where you're just changing the language, trying to make it feel softer, but you don't actually change anything. I mean, now I'm someone who uses the term chairperson as chairperson here in Sacramento County of the Libertarian Party. I do use chairperson. But it's because libertarians are a diverse group, and I have to be cognizant of that. I don't get offended if other people don't, or if someone uses chairwoman or chairperson or chairman. No one cares. I just do it because I feel my my constituency appreciates it. But they also didn't complain when I didn't. So I just think it's more accurate, right? People come in and out the thing, and that way we'll just call it a chairperson. So that way in documents, it's always the same. It doesn't change depending upon who's in the seat, whether the chairwoman or chairman. So it's just easier. It's just easier. But in terms of other things, you're going, but it didn't change anything. It didn't change my role. It didn't change how people perceive me. It's just, like you actually said at the beginning, it made it a little better description. It was a little tighter description, right? That's really what it was. So it wasn't really for political correctness. It was just a tighter description. But I don't know. It's goofing with the language. It's irritating.
I'm just glad that pilot is not gender specific.
What if we speak Spanish when chairs have a gender? What would you do with that? What would happen now?
Because I'm learning Spanish now, and oh yeah, that's a whole. I mean, that's nothing but gender specificity everywhere. Darn near every word. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, that's one of the funny things too. Is when I was learning Spanish years and years ago, we wouldn't have really. I don't recall us focusing on gender. I think we pretty much said, the language is sexed, and in terms of female and male for the words, we didn't say, well, how do you identify? And then we'll figure out, how we're going to structure the language around you. But that's kind of where we're getting to. And, so there was another thing that's been coming up lately as well. And that's that this whole idea of gender and how many genders are there. And one of the things we're hearing is that, I think I've heard that some places are saying there's 70 something genders, or there's infinite numbers of genders, or whatever. This particular website, Healthline, actually put together 64 terms to describe gender and identity. And so, you can kind of see, some of the things they're using: body dysmorphia, binaryism, but they don't all appear to be pointing directly to a gender. They just seem to be gender related. So, butch, cisgender, which is one of these words I just started hearing in the last few years. You start hearing people throw these terms in a conversation, and it's just like I was talking about earlier. It's like you're confused. You're not even sure what you're talking about with the person. You have to go open up some kind of an online new dictionary in order to figure out what the heck they're talking about. But yeah, I just find it kind of hysterical that, here, this Healthline, they only have 64 terms, and some people are claiming there's more genders than there are terms. I mean, how do you even know what it is that you're talking about with the language, So I don't know. You guys have any thoughts on all this sex gender stuff?
Well, all I have to say on this thing is for people whose body and brain, shall we say, for a kind of a oversimplification, don't match. It's a difficult life, so I can understand that at the difficulty they have to get through. But you can't expect everybody else to be able to navigate 64 genders. You can't expect someone, as you're walking down the street, to know which one of those 64, 73, 10 even. You can't expect someone else to know. And so we have to have some empathy for everybody. Has to go both ways. And we've seemed to kind of lost the notion that it has to go both ways. And that's really all I got to say on that.
That's because you're not a lefty.
But I am, Tim. I am a hippy dippy lefty. I am just today's left is no longer left. That's a whole nother discussion about left versus right.
Yeah.
The left is
you're right. Yeah.
Far left is individual freedom. Far right is belief in government power. And we don't have a far left political system in these days. We don't have a left. Not really. Progressives are not left.
Yeah. Well, and one quick thing on all this too is, as far as language goes, for the most part, it's a voluntary thing that you're doing, interacting with other people. And so, as far as libertarians are concerned, I mean, use whatever you want to use. But, we've seen where this can morph in some places in the world. Everybody was familiar with Jordan Peterson in Canada a few years back, where he was protesting laws that forced you to address somebody by the pronouns that they wanted to be addressed by. And when there's 72 genders or however many, who knows, that becomes kind of an immeasurable task. But anyway, so let me jump over to the Knucklehead Noise Patrol. So that's finding something kind of silly that's been out there by somebody in the press. And this time it is Andrew Fauci that we've identified. And this guy cannot keep from identifying himself as the science. He's not quite sure, I guess, that he doesn't understand that science existed before he did, I guess. And so he's going around telling everybody he is the science. And so it's not just one time. We would think maybe this is just some nutso thing that slipped out of his mouth, but he's been running around doing this for a while now. And as early as November 28th, he was in an interview with CBS, and he said, "If you're attacking me, you're attacking science. I mean, everybody knows that." So, I don't know. And then go back to June 9th on MSNBC. He said, "It's very dangerous. A lot of what you're seeing is attacks on me, quite frankly, are attacks on science, because all of the things that I have spoken about consistently from the very beginning have been fundamentally based on science." Apparently, even his lies about masks and whether we need them or not. But anyways, I'll leave it to you guys.
What a narcissistic nut job this guy is.
That's to say the least, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, good Lord, I am the science. What are you, Darth Science? What the heck? I was gonna have to edit myself. No, you're not. There is no such thing as a science. But the believers in big government like to do this. Whether it's we are the science, we speak for the worker, we speak for the little guy, we speak for the average person. No, you don't. You do not. Unions speak for union members. Activists speak for the activist class. They don't speak for everybody. No one speaks for the whole world. If you haven't noticed, we're all divided. And so this notion that I am the science, no, nobody is the science. The science is everybody arguing, and you kind of figuring out what's closest to being correct. You'll end up being wrong later on. That's what science has shown.
Yeah. Well, this is a big problem, with central planners, as you kind of identified here. Oftentimes they imagine that their view of the world is the one and only correct one, which is why they're so cool with force, because they assume it's all going to be, pushed in the direction they want it to go. So, it's just, kind of terrible. But, there is a little pushback on this, and I guess they're starting to figure out that, some people are starting to say, hey, maybe Fauci lied about some of this experimentation. Which, who knows, maybe there could be some consequences for him. Although I imagine he'll say, you can't put the science in jail.
Well, I ask him, what science does he follow? Does he follow economic science? Does he follow medical science? Is he following sociological science, psychological science? There's a lot of sciences when it comes to public policy that have to be considered. And, if you're not following those either, then you're not following the science.
Well, for Fauci, whatever comes out of his mouth is just the science. But anyways, that's all the time we have for today. So thanks so much for joining us, and we will see you at the next one. Until then, stay free.